humanity will defeat you. The answer to 1984 is 1776.
If we'll just study the Federal Reserve System on the basis of what we know already, if we'll read their literature, if we'll dig into the history, we find out that it's one of the greatest scams of all history.
NAFTA, which basically is a trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, I believe we have made a decision now that will permit us to create an economic order in the world. We are on the verge of a global economic expansion. In a few moments, I will sign the North American Free Trade Act into law. NAFTA will tear down trade barriers between our three nations. It will create the world's largest trade zone. We're now making real progress toward a worldwide trade agreement. We have the opportunity to remake the world. We build security. We build prosperity. Leaders of both political parties built a new order based on collective security and expanded trade. Their statecraft stands to this day. The IMF and the World Bank, GATT, and NATO.
The New World Order is rapidly constructing the physical infrastructure of the North American Union, the NAFTA Superhighway control grid.
The World Trade Organization was only created recently in 1995 to enforce a whole number of treaties. The main one being a thing called GATT, the General Agreement on
Tariffs and Trade, are now one of 23 different agreements that the WTO enforces.
The WTO claims to be a forum for trade negotiations, but in fact it is being turned into an instrument to control all countries throughout the world, not only through trade, but through trade-related agreements.
It's only the interests of big corporations and banks that are represented. And what they are saying is that money values should rule over life values, that human rights and the environment should be subordinated to the needs of commerce.
The binding provision of the WTO requires all countries shall conform their domestic laws, regulations, and administrative procedures to the WTO agreements.
The WTO is kind of like a noose around the neck of human rights, of environmental stewardship, of people's right to health care and to safe jobs and housing and education.
What the WTO does essentially is the WTO places rules on governments which mean that they can no longer regulate corporations.
WTO is the place where companies can use to escape the law of each country, including their own countries.
So what that means practically is that this isn't really about trade between countries, but it's about handcuffs on what policies our governments can put in place at home on a huge array of issues, from who controls basic services like water and electricity.
Well, I think it's really important that people not only look at the World Trade Organization as a trade regime, but I think it's really important we understand it as a new global constitution.
This is the final level of constitutional development.
And all of these is a one-size-fits-all set of rules at the WTO that all the countries are supposed to meet.
And the problem is, of course, is that the WTO has enforcement mechanisms. It can force governments to abide by that global economic constitution.
And the WTO has rules that stick. So when governments go back on or try and change the rules of the WTO,
they can be faced with escalating economic sanctions. So in other words, there is a whole system of economic punishment built into it.
The WTO's concern is only one way. It's only to privatize, to deregulate, to let the corporations come in, and citizens have basically become the enemy of the WTO because we're standing in the way.
Well, it's a trade organization, but it's not a fair trade organization. So, well, I don't know how much I will say about it.
That's WTO.
Let me tell you about Codex Alimentarius. Let me define it for you. Let me help you understand the enemy. And let me assure you that absolutely nothing that I'm going to tell you is exaggerated, is interpolated, or is imagined. Everything I'm going to tell you is documented, and a great deal of it is documented on my website, which is www.healthfreedomusa.org. one word, healthfreedomusa.org.
In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
But if a nation can be brought to its knees, if it is hungry, desperate, the people in that nation will much more likely accept any solution that's offered to them by their government or by a world government. This has not only been going on in America, but this has been going on in every nation of the world. After all these years, you cannot point to one of those countries which has had its standard of living raised one iota by this vast expenditure of money, because it was never designed to do that. The money does not go to the people. It does not go to the industries or the businesses of those countries where it might have a chance of raising the standard of living. It goes to the politicians, doesn't it? It goes to the governments of those countries, and it is used specifically to perfect and strengthen the control mechanisms over their people.
DARPA shot to national fame in 2002 when knowledge of the existence of the Information Awareness Office came to light. The IAO stated its mission was to gather as much information as possible about everyone in a centralized location for easy perusal by the United States government, including though not limited to internet activity, credit card purchase history, airline ticket purchases, car rentals, medical records, educational transcripts, driver's licenses, utility bills, tax returns, and any other available data.
It's worse than 1984 in many respects, but we still have somewhat of a free press, and the system is openly announcing they want to start curtailing it. White House regulation czar says they want to arrest people that criticize the government. Cass Sunstein. The land of the free, home of the brave is being shifted from a once free republic into the greatest tyranny the world has ever seen. TSA has announced and has been running operations all over the country, from Texas to Florida, from California to New York, where they randomly grope people at bus stations and train stations and search their bags, and it's way outside the 10th Amendment, a huge federal power grab, while our southern border is wide open. Meanwhile, illegal aliens are literally running around all over the Southwest, robbing people at gunpoint. In California and many other states, upwards of half the inmates are illegal aliens. Oh, but that's not a problem. Homeland Security hires illegal aliens to build the show fence on the border. That's come out in the news. It's all a sick joke. Have you had enough, America? It's happening, okay? Wake up and break your trance and realize that this stuff is off the charts, un-American, and tyranny that is so science fiction-esque, I can't even believe it's happening. That's the point, is to get people to practice their liberty muscles, to exert themselves. Resistance is victory is like lifting weights. When you lift weights, your muscles get bigger. The resistance, well, when you go to city council and speak out, when you call in the talk radio, when you start a website or your own radio show, when you make a film, when you make a flyer, when you hang a flyer up, when you talk to your neighbors, it has an effect.
What should government do?
Protect our freedoms, have a strong national defense, look and take care of our borders, have a sound currency. So we want to have a protection of the general welfare, the general environment of free markets and ability to trade with each other and travel among the states. That was the responsibility of the federal government, not to run our lives and run everything in the economy and extend, the Interstate Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause to do anything they want to do. That is what has happened.
The Federal Reserve System, the answer is clear. We have to slay the creature, but how are we going to do that? The creature was created by Congress, and that's how it's going to be slain.
Glass-Steagall set up a wall between banks that offer commercial banking services and those that are investment banking operations. Before Glass-Steagall, banks could both loan money to businesses and, at the same time, sell shares in these businesses to their investment clients. In 1999, Congress passed the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, and President Clinton signed it into law. Gramm-Leach-Bliley repealed Glass-Steagall. Now the banks were allowed, once again, to combine investment and commercial banking under one roof. Now their agents were free to loan a lot of money on speculative ventures, knowing that they could sell these investments to their clients.
You vote against NAFTA, GATT, CAFTA trade agreements. You're too much of a idealistic candidate, they say. I mean, these agreements make trade more possible, so what if they're hundreds of pages?
No, I don't think it always does. It's more government, and it serves special interests. We go to the WTO more to get retaliation against those who we think are cheating. Then we go to get lower tariffs. The lower tariffs part, you could do it without more government, so I'm all for the lower tariffs. But you know, everybody's idealistic. Some people are more idealistic depending on international government. I'm idealistic and thinking that these problems can be solved with a lot less government.
We don't need the Army, we don't need the Navy, we don't need the Marine Corps, the Air Force on the streets of the U.S.
Will only gold and silver be called legal tender? Will we end all the unconstitutional federal departments, including the Department of Energy, Education, Agriculture, Commerce, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, and Labor? Will we end the federal war on drugs? Will we end the federal government's involvement in medical care?
You need bold leaders who will stand up and say, this should be done in Washington, but this should be left to the states and the localities respectively. I think this bill is about so much more than health care. It's about whether or not we live and operate with constitutional restraint of government.
Will we end all the federal government's illusionary insurance programs?
Is there anybody here who would like to opt out of Social Security?
Will the IRS's unconstitutional collection powers end?
As Ronald Reagan's commission showed in 1981, not one red cent of your income tax money goes to run the country. It all goes to the private banks.
Will executive and judicial quasi-legislative powers be ended? Will there be no more wars without an actual congressional declaration?
I'm still against foreign aid for everybody. Foreign aid is taking money from the poor people of a rich country and giving it to the rich people of a poor country.
Will we end our foreign policy of invasion and occupation?
The reason that we have to worry about the Al-Qaeda is because we're over there. The more we're over there and the more of the Muslims we killed, the greater the incentive there will be for Al-Qaeda to try to come and kill us.
This is why it is so attractive to talk about a policy where we just mind our own business and let other people decide their fights. It's time for us, especially the American people in our Congress, to wake up and say, enough is enough. We just don't have to be involved in every squabble around the world. Will we ban secret prisons, trials without due process, and assassinations?
Searches that normally require a judge's warrant are performed with an FBI agent's letter, a national security letter. I object to these warrantless searches being performed on U.S. citizens. I object to the 200,000 NSL searches that have been performed without a judge's warrant. I object to over 2 million searches of bank records called suspicious activity reports that have been performed on U.S. citizens without a judge's warrant. In the aftermath of 9/11, our leaders said, "Give us your liberty and we will keep you safe." We would be wise to remember Franklin's response to those who trade their liberty for security may wind up with neither.
Immigration.
Find it rather
what
offensive.
should we do?
Get rid of the subsidies. You subsidize illegal immigration, you get more of it.
Get rid of welfare. Get rid of
all the welfare benefits.
Health care.
I think get rid of the incentives. We wouldn't have so many there if they didn't know they were going to get amnesty. You promise them amnesty, promise them no sweat. You can get medical care and free education, automatic citizenship, food stamps, and Social Security. You're going to get more of it. But I want a free and healthy, thriving economy. And I think we could be much more generous with our immigration. We don't need illegal immigration. We don't need to reward people who get in front of the line.
Freedom is your power and ability to follow your own free will and conscience.
And that's what freedom is all about, trusting that individuals can make better choices than government can make for us.
The answer to 1984 is 1776.